Our next speaker, Dr. Gruzd, with his presentation titled Mapping the Spread of Kremlin's Propaganda and Disinformation on Telegram.
Thank you so much, and hello everyone, and thank you, Martha. It's half of my job introducing why we need to study Telegram. As a computational social scientist, I'm going to dive right into data. There will be a lot of charts, just a heads up, don't be scared. I'll try to walk you through them, and it is a complex area, and that's necessitate complex and mixed method approaches to study it. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be a bit of experts in data visualizations and particular methods called network analysis that helping us to understand this information space and some of the cyber threats that exist on Telegram, but also other platforms. I'm Anatoliy Gruzd. I'm professor and Canada Research Chair at Toronto Metropolitan University. I'm also co-director of the Social Media Lab. This is us. We are interdisciplinary center where we study how people, organizations use social media for various purposes. And so they track the research stream of how mis and disinformation is being shared online and how social media being weaponized is one of our priority areas. So when the full-scale invasion started, we, being in Canada, we're concerned that Canadians are exposed to Russian narratives about the Russia-Ukraine war. So we conducted a nationally representative survey with Canadians asking them, have you seen such and such narratives? Do you believe in them? And so we try to identify what are the vulnerable parts of our population in Canada. Even though we're quite far geographically, we just click away from Kremlin's propaganda and misinformation online. So what we found that, yes, indeed, Canadians, at least half of them said they were exposed to Kremlin narratives. And concerning 30%, so 1/3 of our survey, we had 1,500 Canadians, they actually believe to some extent that it was Ukraine who is the aggressor. So just think about it, 1/3 of our respondents across Canada. What also was concerning that when we control for all the factors, people who are on the far right side of political spectrum were more likely to believe in Kremlin's narratives. Yes, there's a bit of a self-selection bias when somebody already predisposed to believe in certain narratives, they are seeking them out online. But we also did find that individuals, regardless of their party affiliations or prior beliefs, they relied on social media for news about Russia-Ukraine war. They are more likely to believe in some of the Russian narratives. So then we said, well, if that's the case, how can we protect, to inform Canadians and others about some of those misleading, false claims coming from Kremlin elsewhere? Well, we tested different intervention strategies. And so one approach stood out for us was this called soft moderation technique. So you know how hard moderation, meaning social media platform will block an account, Marta referenced some of it, or they will remove your message. So and social media platforms don't like to do that. So soft moderation is the opposite of it. The message, the account will remain, but the platform will put some kind of label at the bottom, or they will put a screen on top of the graphic image saying that, hey, based on professionally fact-checked information, the information in this post is potentially false or misleading. So we conducted another experiment with 1,500 Canadians. What we discovered that by having just a small informational label at the bottom of the message, not even covering the message, reduce engagement with pro-Kremlin narratives by 66%. So fact-checking helps, and adding little labels at the bottom does help to inform Canadians and others online. But the problem, of course, we know that platforms now going away from saying they're not going to be fact-checking, they're not going to be partnering with professional fact-checker, and they are claiming that crowdsourcing will help, but it doesn't. And I'm really looking forward to presentation actually tomorrow. So Victoria Romaniuk, who is from Ukrainian fact-checking organization, Victoria, somewhere here you are, hi. So she will be telling you, I'm curious to hear about your work on Stop Fakes and some of the challenges you experience. But anyway, so the bottom line that we need to be vigilant, because even within Canadian society, quite a few of Canadians exposed to, and some of them believe to Kremlin mis and disinformation. And so this brings us to today's project, where we're looking at the Telegram, which is, as Marta tells us, quite prominent platform both in Ukraine and Russia, as well as elsewhere. If you haven't used Telegram, it's helpful to compare it to Facebook. So while you can DM, like send direct messages on Telegram, uses just like regular messaging app, most popular features is essentially a Telegram channel or Telegram group. A channel, it's like Facebook page where you have organization or individual creating a page and everybody follow that page. So that's your Telegram channel. And the other popular affordances is Telegram groups, just like what the name suggests. You join a group, could be up to 200, or could be a larger group. It can be public or private groups, and then you can post and comment on other people's content. So that just gives you a bit of background. To study something like Telegram, first you have to collect the data in a systematic way. Of course, you can try to kind of collect as much as you can, but you're going to waste a lot of resources if you try to collect everything. So in our work, we decided to have a very purposeful data collection strategy. I'll tell you about that as well. I heard some of the questions this morning. Those of you, especially students who are interested in this research area, getting into it, asking what kind of methods, tools you're using. So there are lots of computational tools you use, but first you do need a platform that has a publicly facing mechanism for researchers and developers to collect and analyze data, at least publicly available. So fortunately, from research side, Telegram has that mechanism. It's called API, Application Programmable Interface. But because everybody can access it, we have to assume, even regardless the fact that, which is important information that who owns the platform, but even regardless that Russians also have the information we have about Telegram. So keep that in mind. But anyway, long story short, there are lots of technology going into the data collection analysis. If you're interested in the space but don't have technical skills, at the social media lab, we're also developing tools like the one mentioned here on the right side called Communalytic, that can help you collect data from Telegram and do your own analysis on narratives or networks. So now let me tell you a little bit about purposeful sampling I mentioned earlier. It starts actually by selecting specific accounts, channels in our case, and groups that we know in advance talk about Russia-Ukraine war. So when the full-scale invasion started, we look at different listings, different information, and compile a list of 177 channels and groups that were popular at the time and knowingly discussed Russia-Ukraine war on the Russian and Ukrainian side. And then what you do, you kind of follow breadcrumbs. You see what they post and what links they share or what other channels they reposted messages from. And you start creating this kind of network by following the breadcrumbs. You follow in the same way people would share information on the platform and communicate. And over time, over multiple iterations, in our case was 5 iterations, this network grew from the green dots visually represented here, those are seed channels and groups, to more and more added channels. So that's kind of, we're trying to map that particular targeted area of Telegram that we are interested in studying. So in a network sense, each dot here is a channel or group, and connection will represent some form of communication. I love presentation by Professor Friedman this morning where he used this metaphor of collage to understand information space. So in our work, we're using a network principles to understand information space. So this is an example of how those breadcrumbs, those information pathways are discovered. Let's say this infamous account, Donbas Gdevushka, and by the way, one of the moderators for this account was a former military, US military, and so what this account does right now is linking to, in this example, to the Russian news channel, RIA News, but you can see the news is actually in Russian, but they are kind of translating to American audience, essentially the same information, propagating to their own network. So essentially by knowing that this Donbas Devushka channel linked to the other channel, RIA News, it helps us to recreate that information pathways from channel A, Donbas Devushka, to RIA News. Another example of its feature of Telegram is one can forward the message. You don't have to actually write a text, you can just repost it, and it's called forwarding. So that also helps us to create and kind of reconstruct how information travels through this network. In this case, the same account reshares news from another channel called Missiles and Nukes, and this is for context. It was when first time Kyiv using Patriot, he essentially shut down Kinzhal ballistic missile that nobody believed it's possible. Russian didn't believe it, and so what they're doing here, this Missiles and Nukes channel, kind of disproving, saying, well, actually Kyiv didn't really shut it down. It's all a fake. And so the Donbas Devushka forwarded that particular video and messages. So by following this again breadcrumbs, we developing this information communication network that helps us to understand who are the most influential channels and groups on Telegram, and who might be influencing others, and in what region of the world. Because you saw sometimes they're in Russian, sometimes in English. With this network, we can also answer questions like, is there a direct or indirect information pathway between a channel that Zelensky has on Telegram and a news aggregator, popular news aggregator in Russia, BB Breaking? Normally you'll say, well, how is it possible? There's no way BB Breaking would be like aggregating something Zelensky said. Well, at least not directly. But in fact, we did find that there is a direction, there's a 10 degrees of separation. You know that famous Milgram study where it found all people in the world connected like by 5.6 degrees of separation? Well, on social media, usually there are 3 degrees of separation. So 10 degrees of separation is quite far. But what more important is, where's that interface? Who is the bridging agent that converts information that coming from Ukrainian side of Telegram, in this case, channel from Zelensky, and goes to Russian spaces and vice versa? So that was critical. So just by looking at this exercise, we label going through this channel, we label in green color, those were like Russian or pro-Russian accounts, and you travel until you reach the account we label in like light blue color, critical of Kremlin. So essentially it's Medusa publication, alternative news that was blocked by Russia. And so that was the connecting piece, the bridging agent in this case, because after that you go into the pro-Ukrainian news channel and then the Zelensky's account. So while some may be skeptical of anything like alternative to Kremlin, whether it's fake or not, or opposition to Kremlin, so I understand those feelings, those are legitimate concerns. Here, this simple example does demonstrate the important role of those type of entities being a bridging agent if they have true, honest intentions. Now, from this one example, pathways, now we're kind of zooming out to see this busy network visualization. I'm laughing because we're in this National Art Center here, and the networks always impress me for the artistic side, but they're actually quite informative if you know how to read them. So I'll just quickly walk you through some of the basic principles, because we can then learn practical insights about the Telegram use by Russia and Ukraine. So what we see here, each dot, they're very small dots. Those are Telegram channels and groups directly or indirectly involved in the discussion about Russia-Ukraine war. What algorithm software we use does essentially adds a color automatically to the groups of nodes, groups of channels and groups that tend to reshare each other's information. So imagine we have this audience here, we have one group of chairs here, you will be one cluster, one color, and the rest of the chairs, because you closer to each other and you can whisper to each other, you in this other cluster. So that helps us to map the Telegram into the subgroupings. And in fact, I labeled those groupings for you. Number one here in pink, and when you look at the legend, it says Ukrainian and pro-Ukrainian channels, and there are about 15% of all accounts in that group. So this is the largest category, but let's not be misled. Ukrainians are not the largest stakeholder or representatives on Telegram. Even though that cluster happened to be the largest in terms of percentages, the rest of the clusters are Russian or pro-Russian. So in fact, you have to flip it to say that only 15% of that space really friendly or pro-Ukrainian or Ukrainian information space. So it is quite hostile environment, and so if you are unknowingly coming to Telegram expecting to find reliable, credible news about Russia-Ukraine war, well, more likely you're going to end up in other parts of this Russian side of this Telegram. Not advising that at all. Next, we can then also dive deeper into the Russian side, where we can see this large in the center, this blue color, cluster number 3, pro-Kremlin military bloggers. So those are, accounts that often repost on the ground military updates, and they're tightly connected with Russian news organizations like RIA News and in the green cluster just on top of it. And then you on the peripheries on cluster 5 and especially and 8, those are your regional channels from different areas, oblasts in Russia. So they are kind of rebroadcasting whatever that central nodes, military bloggers and RIA News and type reposts. So it's kind of propagates from the central nodes, and everybody else just follow, share the same content. In fact, so this slide, and by the way, I put some QR codes so you can follow the QR code. I have link directly to our website. And I'm happy to share slides after the presentation as well. The work we do uses publicly available information, and as Academic Lab, we want to inform the public so all the data and information is available. But if you don't get QR code, it's on our website. It's called Conflict Misinfo, one word, conflictmisinfo.org. So all that content is there as well. I just really finished it last night. So it's like you first people to see it, and it's quite informative. So let me tell you why. So altogether, for the last 3 years, we collected over 300 million messages from Telegram on this topic and over 30,000 channels and groups. So who has time to read 300 million messages to understand it? No, I don't. And even with automatic techniques like topic modeling, they tend to come up with very obvious observations, not quite helpful. So what we did here, we used our network I showed you earlier, and we measured the influence, how many times a channel been referenced by other channels, how often it's been used as a source, information source for the other channels. And we ranked them. Because we had data for 3 years, we had measured their ranking in periods of 6 months. So we have 6 different timestamps. What we can see on the left side, very small font there, those are names of the channels. The #1 channel that most reference in this network, RIA News, I mentioned earlier, state-owned Russian news and quotes agency. But you can see they were consistently, for each 6 months for the last 3 years, they consistently ranked #1. So whatever they post means everybody on Telegram will repost. So you don't need to read messages from 30,000 channels on Telegram. If you follow RIA News, you're already getting very good coverage of understanding what's important. Then you have a bunch of military bloggers. So essentially, the accounts, the top 10 accounts, where you have a straight line, it means they're consistently keeping their rank, top 10. The only changes starting like after the 10 accounts, some channels will drop in rank, so the lines will go down. And what's interesting to look at this type of charts to see what are the new information sources in Russian Telegram space emerging. So something we want to investigate because, like I said, this is we just built based on fresh data yesterday. But this channel at the left, you can see the line shoots straight up. So they used to be ranked 38, and now they're like in number 12. That's a huge jump. The other channels that jumped a lot, it's a kind of news aggregator. It's called Pool One. So this is a Belarusian channel. So clearly, as the war continues, Belarus becoming more important state and actor in the physical and information space. And that can be reflected by the fact that their news aggregator is gaining importance in this environment. So finally, we want to also see not just the one that are most impactful channels, like the one I mentioned earlier, like RIA News and some of the military bloggers, but also those who are on the periphery. We already talked about that pink color, that Ukrainian cluster, where they are on the periphery and means they don't dominate the information space. But what's more concerning is that when we look at English language verified channel, so there's such a thing on Telegram that you can have a blue check marks that actually means you verified, you have like a Wikipedia references, you have a Western media published about you, so there's a kind of gives you a sign of credibility. So all these highlighted notes, those are channels that are posted in English and they're verified. While they are on the periphery, it's understandable, not a lot in Canada, US using them, but many of them are far-right influencers in Canada and the US. And in fact, some of them allegedly took money from pro-Russian propaganda outlets to promote Kremlin narratives. We know that much. And so you can see they are quite active here. And yes, this is just one information space, but they're also active on YouTube and other places. But this is one place you can discover that interface between how the information or misinformation starts from RIA News and similar channels at the core of this network, propagates towards those peripheries, and then transform to other audiences like the English-speaking far-right audiences in Canada and the US. In conclusion, I want to bring back that there are many different actors in this Telegram network that require our attention. So we talk about those central nodes, we talk about nodes that are verified English language, but there are also a lot of non-verified channels that also gain popularity and write in English to English audiences, including those embassy accounts. I was fascinated by earlier Professor Friedman presenting some of their work on those embassy accounts. So I think that deserves additional, studies because this is the type of what they post indicates what they're paying attention to. And the example here, I'm showing you Russian embassy in Canada, in Ottawa here, and they were posting a couple years ago this rainbow flag cross out and kind of posting this provocative message that, oh, family is between men and women. They are paying attention to Canadian society. They know what are the fault lines, what are the sensitive topics that they can take advantage of to polarize our society. And so going back to that survey I mentioned earlier we conducted, where 30% of Canadians think that, to some extent, that Ukraine was the aggressor in the Russia-Ukraine war. So let's not forget that, because they are paying attention to that 30%. And we tend to live in our information bubbles. So there's outside world, and the work never stops. So thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to questions.